Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Word with Kellie Scott Reed. Joining us today is Raegen Pietrucha, editor, writer, educator, consultant. She has a poetry chapbook out, An Animal I Can't Name, that won the 2015 Two Cups Press competition. Raegen's debut poetry collection, Head of a Gorgon, is coming out sometime this month of May. Welcome, Raegen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks again for having me.
Where are you dialing in from? Where are we speaking to you?
Hot and muggy Florida.
I could handle a little hot and muggy. I could handle that right about now.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, so I really can't complain. I'll take it over snow any day, any day.
We've had this slow build up to spring here where we are in Western New York, and it's a slow build up. It looks gorgeous. You go outside and you're like, yeah, I need a winter jacket. So I really appreciate it. My brother is down in Florida and I will be there in just a few short weeks.
Oh,
so
nice.
I'm looking forward to it. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. I'd like to ask you a series of questions. We're just going to take it kind of casually, answer from the top of your head, from the hip, anything that comes to mind, because we have other writers, readers that watch this. And sometimes we get these really great tidbits from folks about their approach to things that really help us in our own writing. That's one of the reasons we do this, is just to make everybody in the community feel like they have a connection in some way. All right, I will ask the first question. What do you feel are the most important elements of good writing?
I have to say, I think writing is really subjective. And so, especially when it comes to love of poetry in particular, for me, the stuff that really rises to the top has it's like a combination of subject matter and craft. That's very personal though. So I do want to kind of put that sort of caveat out there, because for me, I'm most drawn to women's stories, social justice type of issues and focuses. And then from there, I think because of one of my big mentors, Larissa Sporluck, I really look at sound and listen. I'm one of those people where I hear the words as I read them with my eyes. Recitation also is good. Like I also like to hear the sounds out loud, but my brain sort of translates them as I'm reading with my eyes. I more or less hear the sonic elements as I'm reading, generally speaking, even if I'm reading silently. And I'm drawn to image. So it sort of goes like, if there was like a sort of pyramid, it would be like, okay, first off, I'm looking for women's stories generally centered around social justice issues. Then from there, I'm kind of focusing on sound. From there, I'm kind of focusing on image. And then I would say something that also has struck me quite recently is plays with form. So if there's something unexpected, or somebody's doing something really well with a form, whether it's, and I don't necessarily mean like a sonnet. I just mean like, if the form feels very organic to the piece, that tends to resonate with me. So, for example, I read this sort of hybrid thing where it was sort of like a list, but not like your typical list. It was almost like a choose your own adventure sort of thing where you hopped around, and the ending of the piece was actually not at the end because you were hopping around, right? And so the end of the piece actually referred you back up to a piece higher, in like a section higher in the overall piece. And I thought that was brilliant and totally made sense within that piece. So those are the kind of things that sort of, for me as a reader, elevate the writing to the level of good or great.
It's interesting you should say that, because as the editors of the press and I all know, I speak out loud when I start to love something. for example, if I'm reading a poem and it starts to resonate with me, I start putting, oh, let me read it out loud and let it kind of ring through the body, through the ears, and see how it feels. So I really, really feel you on that one part. So be question about what you were saying about form. So you're interested in more like some of the interactive poetry that's out there, where you, yeah, like you said, choose your own adventure. Do you have anybody that you've read recently that you've been really enjoying?
So this piece, it was just written. It was not an interactive piece.
Okay.
But the interactive stuff that I'm most familiar with is actually on Void Space. I don't know if you've heard of that journal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you absolutely do.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of really interesting things. And if you're looking, this is less interactive, but more kind of like if you're really kind of going off the beaten path, and you're wanting to look at some more experimental / concrete poetry in particular. There is, oh my gosh, now the press is escaping, Penteract. It's in UK, Penteract Press. So their books, that's the only type of work that they publish, is that kind of work. Like it has to be really highly experimental, concrete type of stuff. So if you're interested in that, then that's the direction. But it doesn't have to be like, I think that there are opportunities to really, especially in poetry, to take advantage of any free verse, really. What you do with lineation and stanzas, that, again, as long as it really kind of feels organic and you're trying to forward some kind of message or meaning through it, I think there's a lot that can be done with that. I know a lot of people do the prose poem, and I think that makes sense if it's organic for what the subject matter is. But I also think that you can just as easily do something very interesting, and give sort of fresh meaning or build meaning into something that's free verse with your lineation, with the way you do stanzas. Are you using couplets? And if so, why? I mean, I think asking some of these questions about how you're putting the words on the page physically, how it looks physically, can bring another level of meaning to the work.
That's great. Thank you so much. Does writing energize or exhaust you?
It actually does both. So while I'm writing, I feel very energized, but by the end of that day, like I'm brain dead. Like it's mentally exhausting for me, but almost in a weird way, physically energizing. It's almost like going and like doing like a workout, like a really intense workout, and then like it's nighttime and you're just out like a light. I sleep really well on the days where I've written like for a couple hours, like really well. I'm just out, and it's because it's like my mind can't, it's like it just can't possibly do anymore. Whereas, on any other day, it's just like got a bazillion thoughts floating around in it. It's almost like an emptying of the vessel, as it were. So it's both for me.
Okay. And is there a type of writing when you're writing, is there one that you find, like for me, I really love to write these short little bursts of poetry. Those energize me. It's when I have to get really deep into characters and remember what was said 3 pages ago is when I feel it most exhausting. Is that similar, or is it just doesn't really matter for you?
Well, so in working on my memoir, I find that I don't remember what I wrote like the page right before. So I mean, I wish I could, but maybe that's poet brain. I don't know. Like it's like once it's out, it's like, oh, I wrote, like, I can't tell you how many times I've gone back to the draft, like the chapters I've drafted so far in my memoir. And I'm like, I don't even remember writing this. And I've heard poets say that like all day long, where like they'll find an old draft, and it's happened to me too. Like they found, and they're like, who wrote this? I guess I did. When did I do this? Like, I don't even remember this. And it's those kind of moments. So, because I have poet brain, I cannot experience that problem.
Okay. I love that. All right. What inspired you to start writing in the first place? How did this come to be for you?
So I learned how to read when I was really young, and I think that that really colored a lot of my life choices as far as education and career. Um, I made a book, like I started making books in second grade, part of a class. I mean, it wasn't like just me like, oh, I'm going to make some books. Like it was a teacher and her name was Miss Buckman. And she had us, make these books and they were ridiculous. But, like, hey, that was my first written by and even illustrated by in crayons and stick figures and all that stuff. And I think, that process of like, writing, like making your own stories. I mean, because kids tell stories, they tell stories to themselves, they tell stories to their siblings or their friends or both or whatever. And it's just sort of like but I don't know that, well, maybe nowadays they do, but back when I was young, I know that not all of my peers were putting those on paper. But I think the experience of putting them on paper at that early age influenced me. I mean, I believe that it did. So that's sort of, I think, what started like sparking it for me. Plus, we got pizza. I don't know if you remember the book it. If you remember that, like you read, and then you get little star stickers, and it's like, yeah, I'm a superstar. And then you got the free pizza, and you're like, yeah, pizza. I'm gonna read some more and get some more pizza. Yeah. Like, I mean, it was brilliant. So.
Yeah, I can't look at a Little Caesars box without wanting to break out the Shakespeare anthology. I really, no, I remember that. I remember loving book days as a little kid, book club, and thinking it was the greatest thing in the world. I still think it's the greatest thing in the world. I love going to 25-cent book sales, that kind of thing.
For sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Our last question. Who is your literary hero?
Louise Gluck. I was really inspired in undergrad by her poem Mock Orange, specifically, but then I read more of her work. Averno is my favorite collection of hers, although, I mean, it's all good. There's something about the authority of her voice that has always spoken to me. And specifically in Mock Orange, she says things that like women aren't supposed to like think or say. And at least back when I first read this was like more than 20 years ago. So, I mean, different times now, I guess is my point. So the poem might not necessarily feel so sort of subversive, I guess, to today's readers or by today's standards. But for me, I hadn't really ever heard somebody kind of put things that way, like, about hating sex or, the man's mouth paralyzed, sealing her mouth. And by her, I mean the speaker, not Louise. That kind of thing, those kind of sentiments, you just, at least not in my family or among my friend circle, you just didn't hear women say things like that, even if they were feeling them or even if they weren't, but like you just didn't, that conversation just wasn't even taking place. So to open a book and like see this poem, like talking about this, you're just like, what is this? But it's like, ooh, I love it. So
yeah. We talked in past interviews with some authors. We were talking about the subversiveness of literature. By subversive, I mean those books you had to go and sneak that you hid underneath your mattress. For me, I didn't really have much to hide because my parents were pretty great about that stuff. But I had friends who would go get Summer of Fear out of the young adult section. And it was a scary book, but we were only 10. So it was young adult, young, that kind of teen stuff, but it was way out of our league, that kind of thing. And some Stephen King, being the first taste of what sparks and ignites you. So yeah, I have to look up that book. I'm going to re-listen to this so I can so I can make sure it's correct, because that just sounds amazing. Amazing. Because very cool. So I'm just going to let you take the next few minutes. Are you working on anything in particular that you'd like to let us know about, or let us know about your website?
Oh, sure. So you can always find me online. My website is Raegen MP. So it's my first name, which is spelled funky. Thanks, Mom. Raegen, M as in Mary, P as in Peter, .wordpress.com. So RaegenMP.wordpress.com. I did mention I do have a memoir in progress. That's been, I'm like 18 chapters in, but I've had to put that on hold around like the October, November timeframe of last year, because then I focused all of my energy towards promotions and PR work for my forthcoming poetry collection, Head of a Gorgon. So the memoir is in progress, but then I had to kind of just put that aside and focus my energy elsewhere. And I do look for, I mean, I'm hoping that soon I'm going to be able to get back to that. Maybe next month, as early as next month, maybe, I don't know, we'll see. But definitely after the book is actually out. And I've got pre-order packages that I'm already like divvying up and preparing, you know, so it's, you know, that's all got to be done before I can get back to writing as like my main sort of what I can do in my free time thing. So yeah,
which is so scarce all the time. The free
yeah.
time, there's never enough. Why did you name your collection Head of a Gorgon? I first of all, I'm a huge Medusa. The whole mythology is fantastic, but I'd like to know why you chose that for your title, like a little preview of why.
Yeah, absolutely. So when this project started out, it started out as my thesis in grad school. And it had a different focus where it was really kind of exploring just the various retellings of the Medusa myth. I mean, the sexual violence aspect was definitely part of it, because that is her story. I mean, that's sort of like the main point, I guess, of that myth. But it was really kind of exploring different versions, different variations, and it kind of brought it into a contemporary space. But it wasn't what it ended up becoming for this book length collection quite yet. So in grad school, I remember I was like pulling my hair out, just trying to figure out like, what am I going to title this? And the title of my thesis is actually Articulate Coil, which I think is going to be as good as it was going to get for that, because the book wasn't what it, well, for one thing, it wasn't a book yet, but it wasn't the story yet either. And so I think one of the reasons that I was struggling so much with titling was because it wasn't the story yet. And that probably, like, I will take that lesson with me as like, okay, so I know next time for me, if I'm really struggling with it, with titling of a collection or chapbook or thesis or whatever, that it's probably because it's not, like, the idea isn't fully fleshed out, and I either need to fully flesh it out or I need to go in a different direction. But in any case, it's not done. So when I graduated, right, the last workshop right before I graduated, Larissa and my small cohort, I had them over and I made pasta for everybody. And so we're eating pasta and we're doing our last round of workshop. And at the very end, Larissa's like, you know, I kind of feel like these poems that you've been writing about Medusa, and then these other ones. So I had been also, like, I was on like two different tracks at the same time in grad school. I was writing work that was just going to be on the Medusa thesis. And then I was writing these sort of like more personal poems, things that had happened to me, things that had happened to other people, just more like memory type stuff, but very much in contemporary times. And she's like, you know, I really feel like you need to bring these together into like one story. And I was like, okay, weird timing, but that makes sense. And it made sense almost as soon as she said it. And it was like, duh, like, how did I not see this whole time, right? But that actually was the start of me coming towards the title. So as I'm working towards building a singular narrative, so taking only part of what the thesis was and really rewriting a whole bunch of that, and then taking a chunk of some of this other stuff that I had been working on in grad school or earlier or later, and sort of building out a childhood essentially for Medusa, so that it really is a narrative, a singular narrative in contemporary times, in a contemporary space, that just makes sense, I guess, from like beginning to end. I had to kind of start thinking about, okay, so it's not articulate coil anymore. So is it Medusa something? But in naming it Medusa, or putting Medusa in the title, I felt that because that character, people have ideas about the character already, and a lot of them are actually incorrect. Mm-hmm. if they read like that Amazon commercial, not so much. So it's like, okay, so if I put that out there, people are gonna already have like sort of like misconceptions. But also when you name something, there's a distance, and this is the problem with language overall, right? Like, we are writers, and so we use language as a tool, but language fails us. So, and this is one of the ways that language fails us. As soon as you name something, there's automatically a distance between you and the thing as a reality. Like, the thing in reality is not the word. And then the distance between you, the word, and the thing is because the thing is like, the word is like in between you and the thing. I don't know. I'm probably not explaining this very well, but it creates a distance. And what I wanted to have happen with this book is to minimize as much as possible the distance of the reader's experience of Medusa as they're reading these poems. If they want to enter the experience and read it from, because they're from the first person perspective. If they want to enter these poems and read them as if they are monologues or dialogues or soliloquies or what have you, if they want to imagine that perspective, they need to not have a name, because their name is not going to be Medusa. Nobody names their kid Medusa. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So already, if you put that name Medusa on it, there's already a distance. So
yeah, I know exactly kind of what you're saying there about the distance. No, that's really striking something with me, because I want to let you know I know what you're saying, because of also the preconceptions, all the history, all that stuff that comes, and you're telling the story of someone different under the guise of that history, but you don't want to name it that. So yeah, I get it.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you. I'm glad I didn't just totally like ramble for no reason. I mean, I ramble, but not for no reason, no purpose. So then I know that I'm not going to have Medusa in the title. So, oh my God, like, well then how do I tell people like what this is even about? So as I sort of built out the collection, I noticed that a lot of my re-envisioning or reimagining of Medusa is really, it's not so much about snakes coming out of the head, but more of the snakes in the head, like an internalization of things, of experiences that women have, especially as related to sexual violence. So it was like, okay, so, you know, I really want to get across this idea that, you know, Medusa just looks like any regular person, because that's how I envision her, and how I envision most survivors' experiences. I mean, it's not like, you know, something of that nature happens to you, you don't get snakes coming out of your head, but you are haunted, and there something changes within your head from those experiences. I mean, many things often change. And so there was just this kind of circling around this concept of the head, not just as the physical head, which of course, you know, gets lopped off by Perseus in the traditional myth, most versions of it, but the mental space and what that means, especially, you know, as a survivor in contemporary times. So, okay, so I know I want to focus on the head in some way, and I know I can't say Medusa. Gorgon seemed like as good a word and as specific as a word as any, because I don't know of any other Gorgons besides Medusa and her two sisters. So it's a very specific word. I mean, I think maybe there's something related to jellyfish, maybe, that might also use that term. But outside of that, I mean, the term is very specific without being a name that creates that distance. So that's sort of how Head of a Gorgon came to be the title.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. This is the kind of thing that I really love when we go and we get to hear someone's process, especially for something that sounds something I would really love. So I'm really excited for your book, actually,
thank you.
for to be able to read it, because it sounds absolutely incredible and timely and well thought out and subtle, yet because there's something to me about the putting across a broad idea for a specific subject that allows people the room to come in with their own selves to read your work and put themselves into the work. So thank you so much for explaining that.
No, that's the goal anyway. I mean, we'll see if I was successful or not.
I am sure you will be. That's awesome. I thank you so much, Raegen, for joining us today. I really do. This has been really interesting, and it's been so nice to meet you. I love meeting new people and getting to know them. When you talk with writers, you can't help but get to know something about them just from what they're saying, because your writing is you. Even if it's fiction, it is still you, and you bring something to your writing of yourself. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Yeah.
And we hope to everybody checks out Raegen's work. Go to her website. It's gorgeous. It's really well done. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
You too. Sure.
So Raegen, when is one of the first times that you realized in your life what language had power?
So it was at a very young age, and it was because my parents would actually spell a word out. In this particular case, it was the word candy, because they didn't want me to know what they were talking about. So whenever they were discussing potentially giving me candy as a child, instead of saying, should we let Raegen have some candy? It was, do you think we should let Raegen have some candy? And I, at some point, put that together in my head and started understanding what that spelled, and started demanding the candy. And so that was my introduction to the power of language, and also, revealing of my deep and abiding love of sugar.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. That is absolutely a riot. We think we're smart parents. We really do. My dog even knows when she needs to go OUT. Then she's looking at me, right? Like, she knows how to spell it. After a while, what we have to do is start switching up the spelling. Using different languages. I don't know. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, what is your favorite candy? Do you have one?
Chocolate. I mean, hands down, it's chocolate. I eat chocolate every day. I mean, granted, in moderation, I can't go overboard with anything sugar related, but yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, I can understand why my parents did what they did.
Chocolate is life itself. It's worth every second when you eat it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much.